Okay, welcome everybody. Let's start this session about HeiQ Smart Temp, activated cooling technology for fabrics. We have Tim joining us. Tim Skedzuhn, would you like to start by introducing yourself and taking over?
Sure, thank you, Rachel. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Timothy Skedzuhn. I am the president of Global Brandforce at HeiQ Materials AG. We are, and I'll give you some overview, a Swiss-based material sciences company specializing in technical textile finishes that add value and consumer awareness to the products that you are developing from a fabric and product development perspective. We were founded in 2005. We were a spin-off from ETH, which is the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. And we make only technical textile finishes. We do not make fibers. We do not make textiles. We count on our partners in the manufacturing area to do that for us. But when we make any of these finishes, of which HeiQ Smart Temp is one of those, we take into account what is most important from you as a designer or developer, and that is the traditional textile attributes that you rely on when you're developing a new product. So hand feel, color fastness, crocking, elasticity, tensile strength, any of those attributes that you need in a fabric to make garments or footwear, none of our finishes will in any way adversely affect any of those attributes. So you can develop and design in confidence that adding a HeiQ technical textile finish will only add value, and performance will not detract from what you normally look for. We also, whenever we develop a finish, we ensure that it is extremely versatile with no limitations. So fabric construction, whether it's knit, woven or non-woven, fabric composition, whether it is synthetic, natural, or blends of fibers, all of this can be have our finishes applied to them. So there are no restrictions with regards to that. Now, without further ado, and I'm sure you're all zoomed out to the max, let's start with the presentation on HeiQ Smart Temp. What is the issue? Traditionally, in any apparel application, the issue is comfort. The issue is thermal comfort. The issue is moisture management comfort. And over the last 11 years that now HeiQ Smart Temp, formerly HeiQ Adaptive, had been in the market, those are the areas that we have focused on improving with input from the consumer markets globally. So what we found is that through various study groups in both Europe and the US, that 65% of all consumers wearing products want some form or other of thermal regulation and moisture management. And interestingly enough, they're willing to pay more for it. So on average, almost 20% more per item when using or experience or getting those types of attributes in their consumer product that you've designed and developed. So those are really interesting metrics, and it shows you that the technology actually really works and people are willing to pay for it, which increases your margin, your profitability, and your brand loyalty. So when you bring something like this to a consumer, they have a great experience and then they come back to you wanting to buy more of the same. So that's a win-win for both us as a supplier to you and you as a brand. What HeiQ does also is we don't just sell you a drum of chemistry. That's not who we are. We design, manufacture, sell, and market all of our own textile chemistries. We do not relabel, repackage, resell. And in conjunction with the manufacturing and distribution of these chemistries, we also offer a full suite of marketing support and sales support and technical support in region around the world to make the seamless addition of these chemistries to your fabrics that go into your products. Next slide, please. So the real issue is overheating on one side, but also feeling chilly on the other side. So what we don't want is to feel too hot or too cold when we're in our activity, especially now where with COVID, most of our stress release is done through, and most of our mental health well-being is achieved by our favorite outdoor or indoor physical activities. So what we don't want is if you're out there, say for example, cross-country skiing or riding your bicycle, we don't want you to feel either too hot or too cold, because that will give you an excuse to stop. And then you lose the benefits of physical activity to improve your mental health. So what we want to do is ensure that across all temperature ranges and all microclimate ranges within your activity, that you have a thermal equilibrium. So not too hot when you're exerting yourself or the ambient temperature goes up, or not too cold when it's still chilly outside and maybe you didn't layer or wear the appropriate clothing for that activity. Next slide, please. The solution, glad you asked. We have over years refined the HeiQ Smart Temp technology to the point where now it's really two technologies in one. So instantaneous cooling, so not just a feeling, but an actual cooling at the start, and also prolonged, longer lasting cooling. There are three modes of action typically associated for functional thermal treatments. And they're based on either melting energy action, which is typical of a PCM material. So as the wax-filled glass beads in a PCM warm up, the material melts, and that releases energy and thermal activity. You have a solution energy action where something is dissolved in a solution, and as it dissolves, basic chemistry here, you get a release of heat or thermal change. And finally, vaporizing energy action, which is the most similar to the human body's physiology naturally, whereby we perspire in order to cool ourselves down. So as the sweat emerges from the body onto the skin, the evaporation of that sweat on the skin is what gives you your cooling. And it's not a perception of cooling, it's actual measurable cooling. We don't tend to use the middle option, the solution energy action, because those are similar to the menthols or other applications to textile, which have very limited wash durability. So with HeiQ Smart Temp, you have proven validated performance, you have no impact on traditional textile attributes, and you have very, very good wash fastness and durability. So it lasts minimum 25 washings, sometimes out to 50 or more. So your consumer can have a long-lasting effect and performance improvement and more enjoyment. Next slide, please. So here we, again, just to talk more, you get in this one technology, you get both the instantaneous cooling and the longer lasting cooling, which gives you the benefit across all stages of your activity, keeping you more comfortable from a temperature and a moisture management perspective so that you're able to enjoy your activity longer. So here we say that we start cool, we stay cool. Not too cool, because if you much below 20 degrees Celsius, you will get that chill-off effect. So at the lower temps, say when you're first going out for your activity and it's cool outside, what you don't want to have happen is a chilling effect. So there's a small amount of thermal buffering in the technology. So at cool temperatures, when the skin is just starting to perspire, as you increase exertion, that moisture is absorbed and stored within the polymer structure, so your skin stays dry. Dry skin in cooler climates is more comfortable skin. And as you progress through the activity, when the microclimate goes up or when the ambient temperature goes up, that's when you get the cooling. Cooling when it's needed, thermal buffering, temperature equilibrium when you don't. Next slide, please. Here again, we show what happens. And again, we measure this across two different temperature ranges when we do the testing for HeiQ. So at cool temperatures, feeling cool outside, the cooling actually is not activated. So for example, say you put the foot gently on the gas in the car, and then you put the foot on the brake. The brake is what's stopping the cooling from being activated at low temps. And as the temperature increases, say 32 degrees Celsius and above, which is where we, for lack of a better word, built the thermal activation switch into the polymer, is when cooling is activated. So as you go above 32 degrees centigrade on the skin temperature, you start to go into a thermal stage where it becomes too hot and too uncomfortable. Next slide, please. So HeiQ Smart Temp, every version is based on a hydrofunctional polymer. This hydrofunctional polymer acts differently relative to temperature. So it's a hydrofunctional polymer whose hydrophobicity, or its nature and relation towards moisture, changes relative to temperature. In layman's terms, at cool temperatures, it's moisture loving. At hot temperatures, it becomes more hydrophobic. So think of it as a sponge in your textile, very thin layer of polymer applied. At low temps, it acts like a sponge, similar to you using a sponge in the kitchen when you spill something on the countertop. It absorbs the moisture and stores it in the polymer structure. As we get to 32 degrees Celsius or thereabouts, you get that switch being flicked, and imagine it being more like a sponge being wrung out. The moisture is then released from the polymer structure to the surface of the textile, whereby the evaporative cooling can take place. So again, no cooling when you need it, cooling when you do. So Smart Temp in the market, this, as I said, has been in the market, available in various renditions since 2011. In fact, I came on board at HeiQ 10 years ago. My first trade show, and subsequent all the others, was Textile, where we launched it in Frankfurt in 2011, May of 2011. Since then, we work with roughly over 300 brands globally. Some of my favorites and some of the ones that I've worked closely with, Burton, for example, uses HeiQ Smart Temp in all the lining materials, the taffeta woven fabrics, in their outerwear to give thermal equilibrium during snowboarding, which is a very intense activity. You could be sitting still on a chairlift and you don't want cooling then. You could be hiking up into the backcountry and sweating, where you do want cooling so that you don't overheat in your apparel. Outdoor research, for example, and then some of our bigger clients, Hanes uses HeiQ Smart Temp in their X-Temp range in the United States and globally. Champion and many others, including big box retail in the US. So Target, Kohl's, and JCPenney all use this technology and they do the branding. They work very closely with HeiQ's marketing team on that. Next slide, please. So HeiQ, how do we test it? First and foremost, we always recommend that you, our brand partners, do your diligence. We don't expect you to believe what we say, taking it for granted. We would expect, and we encourage you to do wearer trials, where you can do a half and half garment, or you can do treated versus untreated garments, and see for yourself. The wearers, 99% invariably say that they felt a difference between treated and untreated. We also do the dynamic evaporation test, which is a modification of the Marks and Spencer's 136A dynamic evaporation test. We modify it so that it's done over 2 temperature ranges. So you get a delta between cool temperature and warm temperature, and between treated and untreated. We do DSC testing. We do FLIR thermal image testing. And at some of our bigger research facility partners, we can do sweating mannequin testing and sweating torso testing. So places like North Carolina State, EMPA, Boken, and Hohenstein all have done testing on HeiQ Smart Temp. Next slide. Here we show the delta. So we want to see, on average, to show validation of treated textile fabrics, a 25% increase between treated and untreated, and between warm and cold, a 25% increase in the weight loss in moisture over time relative to temperature. So we tested 2 conditions in climate chambers, 20 degrees Celsius and 35 degrees Celsius, remembering again that the switch built into the polymer is at roughly 32 degrees Celsius. And you can see on the bar graphs on the right-hand side of this slide, you get a considerable increase or delta in the dynamic range, or the weight loss of moisture, in this case, your perspiration, over time relative to temperature. Next slide, please. So what we also do when we develop these finishes is we ensure that all of the regulatory boxes are checked off for you, so that you, our brand partner, don't have to jump through those regulatory hoops. So everything we do and develop and release at HeiQ is Blue Sign approved. either BlueSign Blue or BlueSign Gray. And if you are a BlueSign member, you may check that on the BlueSign Finder on the BlueSign website. We are also ZDHC compliant. We are compliant with most, if not all, of our major brand partners' restricted substances lists, and we are Okotex certified and registered where required. We also comply with many of the other different regulatory bodies, as you can see under the regulatory profile, European REACH, US TOSCA, the Japanese market MITI, and the China IECSC, as well as Korea and other regulatory, so that you as a brand partner don't have to do that validation work yourself. The polymer is registered within the pharmaceutical industry as completely benign, non-skin irritant, so safe in any next to skin application. Next slide, please. There we go. That's it. I'm happy to answer any questions for you. And it was my pleasure presenting this. Let's all stay safe and healthy and look after one another.
Just a moment. We should have some questions. Let's see if anybody has a question. If you have a question for Tim, you can use the chat function to ask. To kick this off, it's already from my side. I'll start kicking it off. One question, this is next to skin garment, so it touches the skin, it cools it down. Can you tell us how many degrees, or, has this been measured?
Of course, it's been measured, but again, a lab result is only a lab result, and we see ranges of temperature change, or that delta, of between 1 and 3 degrees Celsius. Now, to say that that's exactly what's going to happen in every given instance is problematic, because we don't have control over how the mill applies the technology, or how it's measured when the consumer is trying to find out exactly how many degrees change. So there is a change. It is demonstrable, it is perceivable, but we typically give a range of between 1 and 3 degrees Celsius, which is significant when you're talking about cooling the skin down and avoiding thermal duress or distress.
Okay, we have a question from the audience. Can this be applied to fibers and fabrics?
Primarily to fibers, to fabrics. We have done some limited work with application to fiber. It is more difficult and involved, but our technical team does have the ability to do that. The best way is via the final wet processing of the fabric via either padding or exhaust, and every single fabric mill has the capability of doing that globally.
Can it be applied to finished garments?
We have done some instances where it has been applied either by spray or dipping. You tend not to get as consistent an application as you do during standard wet textile finishing. So yes, it can, but will it be as durable, or will it be as functional? That's open to debate.
Yeah, speaking of wash durability, so if you do it in the last stages of the fabric treatment, how wash durable is it? How many washes does it stand?
When we develop any textile finish at HeiQ, the minimum requirement we look for, which is also industry norm, is 25 home launderings at 40 degrees C. But we have seen over the years on home textile even, which is much harsher wash conditions, up to 50, and in some cases even 100 home launderings or industrial washing. So it's incredibly durable if applied correctly at the mill, which we ensure because we have the technical teams in place.
Okay, since this is ISPO, so there's just a question about sports goods. What would you recommend for, let's say, compression wear? So next to skin compression wear, would you also, use different functions in conjunction with HeiQ Smart Temp?
When we build any of our finishes, we always keep in mind building block functionality. So we build compatibility in these finishes, whereby the ionic nature of the finish, as well as the pH level in the bath during application, are the same or similar. So compatibility is ensured. For outdoor or compression hosiery or compression performance apparel, I would suggest a combination of HeiQ Smart Temp and HeiQ Pure or HeiQ FFL. So Smart Temp is the temperature and moisture regulating, and the other technologies I mentioned are odor control and antimicrobial. So that would be a very good combination. And in fact, Many of our brand partners do that. For example, at New Balance, they do a combination of Smart Temp plus HeiQ Pure. American Textile Company does that for home textile. So yes, we always build the finishes with that in mind.
Yes. See, the second question, is it compatible with other finishes? That's exactly what you just answered. So yes, it is compatible. Yes.
I saw that flash up on the bottom of the screen. I think that was from Diana, but then it disappeared. So
yeah, it's still here.
I answered it by luck.
Yes. Yes. So we've reached the end of this session. Thank you very much. If there are additional questions from Tim, you can reach him over the HeiQ website. That's heiq.com. You can send us a message and we will forward it to him. Thank you very much for this session. And to our audience, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everyone, and take care of one another.
Yes, thank you very much.